Hello, podcast listeners. You are now listening to the Coffee, Health, and Science podcast. I'm your host, Jordan River, and I want to thank you for tuning in today. Before we get started, I urge you, please give the Coffee, Health, and Science podcast a good rating and review, and subscribe and share the show. That's how you can help us out. It's all we ask here at the CHSP. Happy holidays to you. I hope you had a wonderful holiday season. We are coming back at you here with new content. Lots of changes on the horizon. Stay tuned. And I appreciate you guys, each and every one of you listeners. We're back on the Understanding Organic series, probably a bit of a wrap-up because we've gone very, very deep into this subject, talking about regenerative agriculture, talking about what it means to grow organically, coffee and other crops around the world. And today we're kind of doing an overview of factoids, facts about organic growing, facts about regenerative agriculture. They help expand your mind. They help you understand the importance of regenerative agriculture. And today, of course, we have the regenerative agriculture specialist, Marybeth Sanchez, on the line. How you doing, Marybeth?
Excellent, excellent. It's a sunny day.
Woo!
And you know me, I like to report the weather. We've had some rain. Yay!
You do report the weather. I love that about you out west. And we appreciate you coming on this show. What an interesting series that we've explored here. I thought I really understood, I had a basic understanding of regenerative agriculture, but every time I do a call with you, every time I pick up a book by Jeff Lowenfels or watch a seminar, you know, it really does, it's infinitely deep. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. I mean, no matter how much I learned, it seems like no matter what, I can always go to a lecture and pick up yet another tidbit. It's always nice to have that many more tidbits. You know? It's
so true. And there's so many different dimensions to it. But again, today we're just talking about fun facts. We're talking about interesting facts, thought-provoking facts, and this is going to be a very, very entertaining episode. Now, when we talk about regenerative agriculture, we're going to discuss pesticide facts, of course, pest control facts, all of that stuff. But most of these that really interest me have more to do with the microbial life in the soil. You know what I mean?
Yes.
The bacteria, the fungi, the protozoa, and nematodes, all that fun stuff. One thing that I read that was interesting is that they've identified at least 70,000 distinct species of soil fungi or fungi.
Right.
What do you think of that?
Right. Well, it's kind of funny because people will come up to me and say, what do you think this is? Well, of these 70,000 possible species, let me tell you.
That's a good point.
It's so fascinating when you see the pictures of them all and how different they are and the ones that you rarely see. But the neat thing about them is that almost 100% beneficial. You know, and life on Earth wouldn't be possible without them, to be honest with you. I think they were the things that first came out of the sea to make life on Earth possible.
Preceded all of us.
Wow. They laid the groundwork for all the rest of us. And the first life on Earth was probably fungal, is what it seems like they're discovering.
That's fascinating. Now, you mentioned something I want to kind of drill down on. Are the vast majorities of these 70,000 species beneficial? I know there was a recent split in the taxonomy where they stopped calling harmful fungi. You were talking about how they're not oomycetes or something like that.
Water molds is a good way to differentiate them because they usually require an excessive amount of undrained water to really get themselves going. And that's what happens even if you have a soil that's normally very dry. If it's very compacted, it's not aerated nicely and it doesn't percolate nicely when the water comes, then that water can sit there and stagnate. And suddenly these spores that have lain dormant for however long, however many years they can lay dormant, then they can become rehydrated. And if that moisture continues to be there, all of a sudden they start reproducing and next thing your trees start going down because they got a water mold.
Interesting.
From just too much moisture, even if you were in a place that isn't necessarily like a natural flood zone or a swamp.
Wow. The wrong type of those 70,000 different types.
Yeah, those naughty ones.
That's right. Now, some of these, fungi perform all sorts of different purposes, but some of these we've actually harnessed for our own benefits. We take some fungi, some nematodes, and we use them to kill pests and use them to kill harmful fungus. We use them as natural pesticides, right? Can you speak on that?
Yes, we can. In fact, the more that they investigate fungus and what fungus can do for humanity and what fungal powers there are. I don't know if you know about Paul Stamets, but he's in the forefront of research and they're finding so many antifungal qualities, antibacterial qualities that the fungus behave so much like a human that almost more like humans than they are like plants.
Wow.
And so they're finding so many things about a fungus that seems like it benefits humans the same way it benefits plants. And so, yeah, those compounds are in there. And here's the tragic thing. The more we deforest in the world, the more species we're losing before we've even got to catalog them and even got to study them and find out what they are. So the more fungal life, the better, as far as I'm concerned. Of course, like I said, there are the naughty boys, but usually if you've got a situation where aerobics are happening, where oxygen is present, and there's the good flow of moisture and air, then you're usually only going to have beneficial fungus. You're not going to have a lot of pathogens. So, maybe you might have a situation with the honey mushroom is what I want to call it. That's the common name. It's Armillaria Malia, I believe. The honey mushroom is a killer. And you probably have heard of that one in Oregon. There's one in Oregon and there's one, I think, in Minnesota or something like that. And they're both vying for the biggest in the world. Wow. It covers I don't know how many acres. It's huge, just gigantic. One single, by the DNA, you can tell that this is not a clone, but the actual fungus.
Whoa.
It is huge, and it kills everything there.
Yeah.
Now, over the long term of, eons, this is a thing that needs to happen. Okay, because then after that fungus is done, new other things will regenerate there. So in the huge, gigantic picture,
we can't let it take over like some sort of horror movie from the 1970s.
Totally, yeah. If it's in your backyard, I would do anything to get rid of it because it's not going to be the beneficial fungus you want to see. However, it does have an edible mushroom, so at least there is that benefit.
Oh, we can eat our way out of the problem, is what you're saying. Okay.
You can. If you cook it properly, you can eat it.
Well, then game on. I'm all about that. But you mentioned the loss of forestation, the loss of these species of fungi. There is a lot of we're going to get into in a minute here, talking about the loss of coffee land is tragic and rapid. The loss of fertile soil, some stunning stuff. Here's one thing that I had to bring up though, because this was hard for me to wrap my head around. Up to 10 billion bacterial cells inhabit each gram of soil in and around a plant's roots. This was from a 2011 study. This isn't speculation. It was done on sugar beet roots. And the key part is in and around the roots. They're not just out in the no zone. They're where the roots are. Whoa. And there were at least 33,000 different species, adding up to these 10 billion bacterial cells. Right. Well, see, that's where why cover crops work, because you got to keep that root zone active. You got to keep that bacterium thing in there, even when your principal crop isn't in there. And you want to keep all that soil activity going, even when you're not having your principal crop growing. You want something in there, and you don't want to be tilling it up and killing all that society up when its infrastructure needs to be constantly worked on, just like ours does. Wow. Those fungal, especially the fungal bacteria, the healthiest plants usually grow in a soil that's somewhat balanced for bacterial and fungal biomass. When you say biomass, you don't mean the number of individuals, you mean the weight of the entire population of those individuals. So a balanced soil, fungal and bacteria, will usually have most plants pretty happy. If you get more on the fungal side, you're going to have fewer weeds. So you'll notice soil that doesn't grow a lot of weeds is probably very fungal. It's also going to be more acidic. Interesting. Because fungus itself is acidic and makes the soil acidic. And in a bacterially dominated soil, it's going to be more alkaline. Because the bacteria are alkaline and they make the whole soil more alkaline. And so if I'm down on the regenerative coffee farms in Colombia, they're trying to balance that bacterial life with things like compost teas, and then the fungal life with things like mushroom compost and all sorts of mushroom additives. Yeah, the more the better. Interesting. I don't know if you can overdose on those things. At least I've never seen it done. Wow. I've never seen that's what it seemed like. And when you do achieve that balance, you see it in the plants. Correct. When I was there, the plants were hurting because there was a there was a huge drought. It actually rained when we got there. You're a fan of the weather,
Okay.
Marybeth. You would have loved it.
Oh, yes,
You can
absolutely.
actually dig into my Instagram at Jordan River IG. I only post when I'm traveling, so I bet that it's still close to the top of my feed,
Yeah.
unfortunately, because I
Oh,
haven't been
yeah.
traveling because of pandemic. But I recorded the Colombian
Uh,
rain, and it was just incredible. But anyways, there was a drought going on, and Oscar was explaining to me how all of these synthetic farms around him were just getting destroyed. And his plants, although they were
right.
stressed, were still able to hold on to the moisture and just survive the harsh weather better. I understand the holding
Right.
the moisture and just having that bacteria, like that makes perfect sense to me. But
And the fungus, and most likely he's
sure,
not tilling or things between the rows so that the fungus is allowed to grow, and that holds so much moisture for the plants.
that makes perfect sense to me. But there are studies showing that, according to the Rodale Institute,
Uh-huh.
yields under organic systems are likely to be more resilient to extreme weather in general. So drought years, higher
Absolutely.
temperatures, that's
Yeah.
pretty mind-boggling to me. And in fact, they were
Yeah.
they were doing a farming system trial on corn. And listen to this fact: organic corn yields were 28 to 34% higher than conventional in the drought years. So people talk about this
Absolutely.
bumper crop, but what happens when
Yeah.
you have a drought?
And
Wow.
especially in places that don't irrigate. I mean, California is famous for irrigating everything, and they have their own issues for that. But so many farming communities around the United States and around the world don't irrigate at all. And a
Right.
drought, oh Lord, what it can do to your crop. And if you're depending on that and you don't have it, and if you don't have the fungus, you're just out of luck.
Yeah.
You've
Wow.
got to have that fungal population established in order to withstand both the drought and the flooding, and to hold your soil in place and to maintain that aeration that we keep talking about. It's not enough to have a moist soil. You need a moist, airy soil where water can percolate and where the bad fungus, or the what we call the oomycetes or the water molds, so that they can't thrive.
That makes perfect sense. And one thing that I also learned, I did not know this fact, which is apparently the beneficial soil microbes can naturally displace disease and suppress it. So
Yeah.
when the drought and the heat is going on, synthetic grows have a harder time with disease. That's
Oh yeah.
fascinating to me.
Especially if you have people that are willing to do the effort on those agricultural projects to do the massive compost tea spraying on the leaf surfaces. The plant canopy. If you can get that done on a fairly regular basis, like maybe at least once a month or so, then you're ensuring that your plant surfaces, not only the leaf but the stem and everything, that it's covered with the beneficials that prevent the bad guys from getting established. If there's
Wow.
no place for them to settle down, then they can't. And this hotel is already full.
That's
They've got
incredible.
to go
They
out
were
to the
doing that
street.
on the coffee farms. They had
Yeah,
ATVs and they would spray.
yeah.
Um,
Some people are willing to go to that effort, and I think the ones that do are the ones that are going to, in the long term and in the future, because this other method is just not sustainable in the long term.
Yeah, that's really what it seems like. That is the scariest part of the large scale, let's just call it synthetic agriculture.
What they're finding about the neonicotinoids, and so much of agriculture seems to depend on those kind of things because they're legal and they're highly pushed by the salesman. And
Oh, interesting.
they kill not only the insects, but they're killing the things that eat the insects. So, every bird, every lizard, whatever, they're all getting up the food chain to this poison. So it's just like the DDT. Do you remember what happened with the DDT
Oh,
with
of
the
course.
eggshells of the birds? Became so that they didn't harden and the eggs couldn't hatch. So we were losing all kinds of birds. And, we can lose our populations of so many animals other than the insects we're trying to kill just because up the food chain, these are persistent
Yeah.
toxins. And they are so widely used. They're in our food chain.
Yeah,
And they shouldn't be in our food chain. Our children should not be ingesting these and have it in their tissues. They really aren't made for consumption. They were designed to be used strictly on ornamentals originally. But of course, you know how those things go.
well, they don't stick around. That's another fact that I learned is when it comes to synthetic fertilizers, when it comes
Yeah.
to synthetic pesticides, they have this ability
Yeah.
to travel. And also runoff is not created equally, it seems, right? Like
Oh, wow. The damage it's done to the wildlife and the water.
And
Oh,
some seem to be
Jesus.
highly mobile. They'll do these studies where it's like, oh yeah, this one sticks around and it hangs around. And it's like, oh, this other one, like, no, as soon as it rains, it's gone. It's in the roadways. It's in the waterways. It like runoff is
Well,
not
there's
created
another
equal, I've
way
learned.
the fungus can really save you. And here's another thing I saw Paul Stamets doing, where he would go out to sites where they would have agricultural runoff that was toxic and ruining everything, and this was going to be shut down. And what he would do would put in like, I want to call them like a tube, bales of hay, long tubular things that he would use like dams, okay, to catch the runoff wherever it was falling, whether it was in the land or a little ditch or what have you.
Oof.
But he would fill these things with the straw and with the mycelium,
Oh,
and as the runoff ran through it, it would be completely filtered out,
whoa.
and so what was coming out the other end was all clean, and the fungus thrived in there. Even when it was salt water, it thrived in there.
That's really wild.
And people always said, "Oh, you can't grow in salt water. You can't grow fungus." And he said, "Well, why not? I'm going to try it and see what happens." And lo and behold, it worked.
Wow.
Don't necessarily count out salt water 100%. It may be just a concentration dependent. You know what I mean? Some places may be too concentrated with their salinity, but
Wow.
the salinity of the sea is supposed to be the same as the salinity of our blood, because we came from the ocean and brought it with us.
I like that. Yeah,
I love
fantastic fungi.
factoids.
You talk about the documentary Fantastic Fungi with Paul
Yes.
Stamets
God,
and
it's
Michael
good.
Pollan, and they talk
Yeah.
about the ability for mushrooms to break down crude oil that's been spilled.
Yes.
I mean, it's just incredible. There really is hope for these
Yes.
natural sciences. Let's be honest. It seems like
Yes.
magic, but these are natural sciences, and I just hope that there's forces out there who are pushing this stuff forward. Like, it's nice.
Yeah, somebody with intelligence and knowledge.
I mean,
Please,
yeah,
because there are solutions.
Exactly. And it's nice to be talking about these things because I hope that someone hears this and is inspired in some way.
Yeah.
But really, we don't need podcasters. We need people like you, Marybeth, who study this stuff and learn it. And then we need people like Paul Stamets to popularize it, to enact it, to execute it, to get it done. We need the Elon Musk of mushrooms, the Elon Mush. We need the Elon Mush to come around.
He is good.
And get it done. You know what I mean?
He does go far and wide, spreading the word about it, and it's really good to see people getting inspired. And he's even trying to get a lot of government contracts and things to try to make the ecosystem itself, the old forests, as part of our national defense system. They must be protected because this is where the fungus are that are going to save us from these diseases, these viruses, and these things. This is the way he's presenting it, because the antifungal and antibacterial and antiviral properties of so many fungus have not even been begun to be explored.
Right. But,
and they're being it's beneficial to us, beneficial to the fungus itself, beneficial to the plants that the fungus is growing around. They're getting all these benefits as well.
I'm glad that there's somebody lobbying for this.
Yeah, full of fungus, boy. Just as long as you're not getting the honey mushroom out there when you're spreading your spores around, spread the spores around. This is just one of my biggest pet peeves. The best, if you're not sure about what spores you've got, go to somebody like the Paul Stamets company is Fungi Perfecti, but I know that there are other companies that do the same thing. They propagate fungus and they, sell you the packets so you can propagate it in your house and put it in your gardens. And I'm thinking, the people who show you their pot when they're growing and they say, look, here's some fungus growing little mushrooms at the soil of my plants in the potted plant. And they're so happy. And it's like, yeah, because you are doing something in there that made that fungus happy and not something that, made the soil toxic for living things.
100%. I was just gardening with some organic gardening soil in my veggie garden in my basement, and a little ink cap popped out of the pot. And I remember being scared at first and then being like, wait, no, I remember what Marybeth said. This is a good segue. Kind of off topic, but I got to ask it. If somebody's interested in learning how to ID mushrooms, if somebody's interested in kind of this whole study, do you have any resources you'd recommend?
Well, first of all, I'd start with Paul Stamets, and I know he has references of people that he admires, and I would look at them. I can't remember their names off the top of my head, but that would be the first place I would go, because he is such an obsessed person. He never actually went to, the college professor route. He did all of his study on his own for so long, and he's become so high in the field that doesn't seem to faze anybody.
Wow.
He will do the experiments that the other people won't do because he doesn't have to wait for grant funding.
Sure.
He just goes ahead and does it anyway.
Wow.
So this is how he learns so much, and he shares so much, and he can get patents on things and make lots of money. But a lot of his things that he could be patenting, he doesn't, just because of his personal integrity. He wants to share this with the world.
Interesting. So you read his books, you watch his films, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Nice.
And check out and see who he would suggest most. But there are a lot of fungi that are fairly easy to identify and don't have a lot of lookalikes that are poisonous. But there's a couple that you really ought to pay attention to. So it's always good to study at least somewhat with somebody who knows what they're talking about before you just go out and start picking mushrooms.
That's why I brought it up, exactly, because you really need to learn your stuff, especially. And I know it's different.
It can be fatal.
Right?
Whole
no kidding.
families have died just
literally
from a dinner or spaghetti sauce.
And I know it's different what you were
forest.
saying, like cultivating your own from a company in your basement is different than going to forage. But I had to bring that up because you want to learn.
Absolutely.
You want to learn your mushrooms before you. Yeah, for sure. Really cool stuff though. Something that I wish I knew a little bit more about, and maybe in 2021 I'll dig into that. Here's one thing I got to ask you, Marybeth, before we wrap it up, because I read something. I want your estimation. I know this is a hard question to answer, but I would just love for you to guesstimate even. I read that in 2012, the EPA evaluated pesticide usage around the globe at an estimated 1.1 billion pounds of pesticide.
Right.
No, I'm sorry. The EPA evaluation was around the world. 1.1 billion pounds were being used in the U.S. 1.1 billion pounds in the U.S. If you look at the number of people living in the U.S., that number equates to roughly 3 pounds of pesticide per person each year. That is freaking crazy. And it doesn't make it out of
And when you
food.
extrapolate out that a lot of people are really organic and don't eat that means that much more for the others.
That's actually a good point. It's not evenly distributed. That's a very good point.
So a lot of people are having a lot more than that.
That's the perfect segue into my question. What percentage of that 1.1 billion pounds of pesticides do you think are not harmful? Are the organic ones? And second part question, how many farmers are employing these practices that use non-toxic stuff, that use no sprays? Like, what percentage of agriculture do you consider regenerative, I guess I could ask?
Very little, unfortunately.
Super little? 1%?
Maybe.
Less than 1%?
But, it's a trend that's growing, though, because people are noticing when their neighbors are doing it, how much money they're saving and how successful they are, and how their crop looks after a flood compared to my crop, you know what I mean? Or the same land side by side responds so differently. Your neighbors start to catch on and they start to talk, even when your population of your state is low because you're all farmers that live miles apart. It does, the word catches on. And when you see them in their little seminars here and there might be 20 to 40 people in the audience, but that's half of the state, you know what I mean, as far as the farmers go. And they all talk amongst each other, they have their little groups and their social media groups, and this word spreads, and they are catching on that there is an escape from the Monsanto trap. And I hate to bring them up, but we all know how they entrap farmers and get them into their system and say, you can't grow
100%
you can't save your own seed. You have to grow only with us.
Cross-pollination issues.
You have to plant this thing.
Even accusations of much deeper stuff, extortion, and we're not going to get into that,
totally.
But there's documentaries on it.
Farmers are killing themselves to escape the Monsanto trap.
Oh, Jesus.
Okay, but you can do it another way. There's another way, and those people are finding out. I can, in fact, diversify completely.
Wow.
I don't even have to grow a monocrop. I can do eggs over here and microgreens over there and fruit over here and row crops over there.
That's a big part of it. Yeah. Speaking to Chris Trump, that was a big part of it. He's a macadamia farmer.
Diversity.
We love Chris Trump. He's a little bit different. He's a KNF guy. So like Korean natural farming and regenerative agriculture definitely go hand in hand. But KNF is more like homemade inputs, making inputs from the land, like
Yeah.
barren wastelands, like
Right.
in the steppes of Mongolia, whipping up
Yes.
some stuff from the weeds that you can use
Yeah.
as it's really alchemical type wizard stuff. Really cool.
Absolutely.
But a lot of it's the
Right.
same idea that all feeds the microbes. It's all about the microbes. Don't use
Exactly.
pesticides, fungi,
Right.
a lot of the same stuff. And he said what you said, which is the macadamia farmers in Hawaii, they see the differences in their neighbor who farms organically, and they're making more money
Yeah.
apparently in that crop.
Yeah.
In that
Oh,
crop.
yeah. A lot
Interesting
more per
stuff.
pound.
Really interesting.
That price tag is attractive to a farmer, when you see that the really high quality stuff, like, Gabe Brown, his produce that he puts out, he gets top dollar on all of it, and he can't produce enough, and he sells it direct.
It's really,
No
really wild.
middleman. He never has to go to the bank anymore for a loan. He gets more money in than he has to pay out all on a regular basis. And he's got so much diversity going on his operation that it doesn't matter if one thing is failing this year or something else is doing great, or most of the other things are, it's a really important thing as part of regenerative agriculture is to be diversified and to have more than one thing going on in your situation, not to have a monocrop and to not have just plants, but to also have animals on your situation, because they provide the fertilizer too.
Oh, birds in coffee are absolutely huge.
Yeah.
That was big down in Colombia. But I do want to recommend something. We talked about fantastic fungi, I think, on a couple episodes, but here's a new one. Chris Trump, the regenerative farmer, the KNF specialist, he has a YouTube page. You can just probably search Chris Trump on YouTube. It'll probably be the first thing that comes up. He has a large scale, I think it's called FPJ video, like fermented plant juice. And what you were saying about saving money, I got to bring this up on the factoid episode. This guy doesn't pay for his fertilizer. He has banana trees all over his Hawaiian macadamia nut farm. And I guess the banana tree flowers into a banana flower. And he goes around this video with his buddies, and there's Hawaiian music playing. It's the best. It's like 20 minutes long. You can check it out. And he hacks down the banana flowers. He takes them back. He chops them up. And he said that you have to do this for banana trees, by the way. You have to cut down the whole tree or something. So he takes it back. He has all these buckets lined up. He chops it up. He throws it in with brown sugar. He just mixes it with brown sugar, big sacks of that's what he buys. He buys brown sugar to fertilize his farm.
That's the expenses.
And it ferments.
That and the alcohol. Those are your two expenses, sugar and alcohol. Now, if you've got a good cheap source of it, then it's going to cost you next to nothing.
I didn't see him add any alcohol. You're supposed to add alcohol?
That's after.
I think I missed
after
it.
After it has sat for the sugar for a while, then you add the alcohol. So you'd see vodka or something like that. But it has to sit for the 6 months or whatever, or 6 months, 6 weeks or something. Whatever amount of
6 months.
Time it's
I think
6 months is a long time.
It's a couple of weeks, and when he strained it, that's his. It even looks like fertilizer. It's crazy, and he said that it's safe to eat and it smells delicious. And he just got it he got it for free. That's so wild.
Free if you have a free source of sugar and alcohol. But you know what? The average gardener isn't going to make it on that giant scale. So the average gardener doesn't need to buy as much sugar and alcohol as he's having to buy.
I mean, is it expensive to get those sacks of sugar? I imagine it's cheaper than fertilizer.
Well, that's what I'm saying. On scale, if you're on a giant farm, it's not going to be that big of an expense for you, maybe.
It's crazy.
And especially if he's in Hawaii, sugar is probably cheap because it grows there.
Oh, good
point. He can probably get sugar pretty easily.
Probably from his neighbor.
Alcohol.
Probably trade it for
Anybody
some
can make alcohol. If his farm is doing well, I'm sure he can afford these expensive. But the average person, because you look at the ratios, it's like 1 to 500 or 1 to 1,000 that you put these things out. You don't need to make a ton of it to do your average little garden in your backyard stuff.
So it's even more applicable on a personal scale. And that's kind of what I want to end off here, which is they talk about the pesticides being used in the U.S. and big ag is a part of that. But what really freaks me out is they've really marketed well to the home front. Like you can find a lot of between Raid and Roundup and pesticides and the weed killer and this and that. Like you probably have a lot of toxic chemicals in your home contributing to that 1.1 billion pound. Yeah, and there's good alternatives out there. Marybeth works with a great company, the amazing Dr. Zymes. It's a great cleaner. It kills pests. It's totally natural. There's a bunch of different options. Look into why you're spraying the weeds in the first place. I hope that episodes like this kind of get you to think differently as you're going through the supermarket aisle, and also as you're going into your backyard and into your garden.
Well, guess what? The two most attracted to nitrogen: weeds and your small-sucking insects, pests.
Is that what we're just loading with the Scott's turf,
your
surf and turf, or whatever it's called?
Too much nitrogen is lots of weeds and lots of small-sucking insects. If you have a lot of weeds and you have a lot of small-sucking insects, you probably have an excessive amount of nitrogen being applied to the soil.
Oh,
an excessive amount of bacteria in the soil, because bacteria and weeds go together. But if the soil is fungally dominated, that's why the weeds won't grow there.
Oh man,
pretty cool.
Just need more fungus among us.
I do.
This was a lovely exploration. We didn't even dig into all the crazy facts, but you know what? I don't even care. This was great, Marybeth. Thanks for chatting. We got to the most interesting ones here, and you are just a wealth of information. We appreciate you coming on the show.
It's always a pleasure talking with you, Jay.
Let's try and come up with another one. So this isn't the last Understanding Organic series. And please, listeners, if you haven't heard the others, go back and listen, because they are quite interesting. This is Marybeth Sanchez and Jordan River. We're signing off. We're wishing you an extraordinary day. Make sure to stay tuned. Appreciate you moving into the new year with us. Thank you all for listening. We'll see you next time. Have an extraordinary day, everybody. Bye-bye.
Happy New Year.